Okay. One mind, one world, people. I'm going to try to look in the camera more because I know some people were, requesting that. I changed my setup a little bit so I can look at it a little easier. But I also am in 1080p today, which is pretty exciting instead of 720p. I am on a trial for StreamYard. And if anybody wants to use StreamYard, let me know, and I can actually, you know what I'll start to do is just put the referral link in my description boxes in case anybody wants to use it. I would recommend it. It's very easy to use for beginners. And they do have a basic plan, which I'm on, and then they have a professional plan as well, which includes 1080p streaming, like I'm using right now. But again, I'm not, you have to pay $50 a month for that, which to me is just way too excessive. So I am going to be just using the trial until the 6th. And then after that, I'm either going to go back to 720p or I might use Streamlabs, which I do have a subscription for. The only thing that is kind of keeping me from using Streamlabs is that it has crashed before on me several times. And I don't want to overwork my laptop because the last thing I really need is a laptop that doesn't work, because if that would be the case, I would be SOL because I just can't afford a brand new laptop at this point. So enjoy the 1080p for this broadcast. It's pretty fun, pretty exciting. Where we left off the other day, and also, I know I said I was going to broadcast yesterday. I have been, as some of you may know, trying to kick caffeine from my intake from my life, and that has been quite difficult, a lot more difficult than I thought it would be. So I'm trying to wean myself off of it now. I've changed my strategy instead of going cold turkey because I have been pretty much useless the last day and a half as far as getting things done. So I'm going to, like I said, ditch the cold turkey plan and try to wean myself off of it. So because I need to get some stuff done. Okay, where we left off on Saturday was this written account, and it's written in a very very prose narrative way by Virginia Roberts, Virginia Giuffre, because I know some people were asking about the manner in which it was written, and they're doubting it, and because it does sound like a fiction story in the way it is written. And someone was even wondering if she had help writing it, which I don't think she did. If she did have help, whoever helped her didn't do a great job because, bless her, I think we all support Virginia, but there's quite a few spelling and grammatical errors, double prepositions, and so forth. So if you ever see times where I'm kind of pausing or the rhythm breaks up a bit, it might be because I'm getting a little confused about the spelling or the syntax or even the diction. So keep that in mind. I think she wrote it herself just because of those mistakes that are present there. But it's basically a written account of her being trafficked by this man, Ron, and then getting moved to this man, Charlie. And if we remember last time, Charlie got arrested by the FBI. They busted down his door while Virginia had slept with Charlie the night before. And Ron had fled the country. So we are going to continue. We're about halfway through chapter 2, and I'll just pull it up on screen too if people want to see that. Maybe I'll just do that. That kind of looks kind of cool. Okay. So she was just getting interrogated by the FBI. I was taken out of the interrogation room after the interview was over with and told to sit at one of the officers' desks while I was waiting for someone to pick me up. Uncertain of who that someone would be, I assumed it would be someone from the Juvenile Delinquents Division to take me back to some state-operated lockdown facility. Not the nicest of places to call home, but I had no choice in this matter. Sitting back in the revolving chair, I was twirling out of boredom and listening to the roaming conversations within the office. I pondered in fearful anticipation of the dreadful places that lay in store for me. Having to have spent a lot of my adolescence in these kinds of places for the sheer factor that my mother said, quote, I was out of control and unable to handle by 11 years old. There was plenty of just reason for me to be so scared of those places. What I knew lay in store for me were constant fights between the rough girls being settled with violent raids, then out came the pepper spray and the strip searches, and worst of all, no sunlight. It didn't matter if you were a quiet, shy girl that didn't belong there. When there was a fight, which could be like a few times a week, every person in the room was considered a threat and were treated like a violent criminal. I hated those places and the memories they gave me. That's why I always ended up back on the streets. No child or even a juvenile should have been subjected to such unreasonable force and neglect. Some of the girls were so used to being subdued to this kind of treatment their whole life that they ended up repeating the same attributes as the people who initially hurt them in the first place. One very sad girl, I'll never forget her, had a father who had been a heroin junkie and decided to play Russian roulette with some of his addict friends, and by fate or chance took the bullet straight through his brain, killing him instantly. Her mother, being a heroin addict herself, spiraled downwards after his death and gave her 4-year-old child to her aging grandmother that eventually had to put my 12-year-old friend in this undire circumstance. I think she means dire. I can only have the highest hopes for her today, but unfortunately for most girls that have been victimized by society, aren't able to ever stop being a victim for the rest of their lives or go on to make other people victims themselves. A sad and unfortunate fate for so many innocent, and it happens so much more than anyone would rather admit to instead of just trying to find a solution. End of chapter 2. Chapter 3. Hours later, I was still twirling myself in the same office chair when I spun around to see my father walking in my direction. I nearly fell off my seat at the sight of him. Gripping the chair's handles, I couldn't imagine what in the world I would say to the man I once used to call Daddy, but now hated for the abandonment and unforgiving wounds he instilled inside of me. He contemplated putting his arms out to hold me, but instead anger and shame took over and he just shook his head. I never saw my dad cry until that day, and I have to say it made me feel young again and sad I had disappointed my parents again. The agents now standing beside us both led us both together back into the interrogation room to retell my journey to my father, who they said I had no choice to tell, or they would have to tell him for me, being I was underage minor and Ron violated the statutory rape law, among many others, when he took me back to his apartment and kept me as his sex slave. My dad couldn't believe what he was hearing, and for his lack of better choice in words, asked me to stop talking. He was just happy to know I was alive. Like everyone I'd known in my life, they would rather brush it under the carpet and not deal with the pain, rather than realizing sooner or later it all comes out sometime in our life, even if it transgresses into our future, then becomes what we are willing to accept out of partners, work, and people in general. Simply saying in other ways than with words that our bad decisions befall our tragedies later on in life. The next discussion was led to where I would go to from here. Before anyone could put his or her suggestion forward, I leapt in with my 2 bits and made it obviously clear to my dad that if I was sent away to another lockdown facility, and if he betrayed my trust again, he would never see me again. I would disappear for good this time, and for all he would know, I could be dead in no time on the streets. He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, he saw the many years I had grown up in the time I was gone and heard the seriousness in the tone of my voice when I made my vow to him. He put his head in his hands and told me the bad news. My mom didn't want me to come home, and she was making his life hell for even suggesting bringing me back into their lives. I, for some reason, threatened her lifestyle and drove her crazy. I had been surprised about a lot of things lately, but not that one. The last time I saw my mom, she ever so carefully lied to me and told me she was bringing me to an eye doctor for an infection. Instead, we walked into this tall blue building with people in uniforms holding clipboards and a few muscly guards. She ushered me inside and hurried up to close the large auto-lock doors behind her, leaving me there alone and in prison, which is what led me to recently living on the streets. My life was hell as long as she was in control of it. So when she didn't want me back at home, I was fine with that too. But there had to be somewhere else I could go to. My dad said he had no choice but to put me back into the facility, but he made a sincere promise that he would not take any longer than a week to try to find a place for me to stay and go to school. A week I could deal with, but I was still unsure if I could trust my father and hold him to his word. But yet again, I had no choice. Being my legal guardian, he could send me anywhere he wanted, and there would be nothing I could do, except for keep running. I gave in, and before he left the officers to take me back to the last facility I had run from, I gave him one last hug and reminded him, 1 week and I'm gone. Nodding his head and squeezing his arms tighter around me, I could only hope that he meant it, but he didn't look too optimistic. In the police car on the way back to the facility, they had to handcuff me in case I ran again, but I had no intentions to anyways. I was going to give my dad the week before I began to search for the right opportunity to jolt again. I was like a ghost come back, and so many of my girlfriends from the past, and there was now a lot of new faces there too. At night, when we were all in bed and supposed to be sleeping, I would be daydreaming of better days and imagine myself somewhere in a comfortable bed, actually enjoying my life for a change. A week went by in this facility, spending most of my days locked up in what they called the White Room, a bare room with concrete flooring, no toilet or even a chair to sit on. The only comfort I had was the blue sweater that was provided as part of the uniform, and my hair scrunchie filled with my stowed away cash that no one had found during my unpleasant strip searches. That's awesome. I would spend hours in the White Room for objecting to their conformity and unwilling to participate in the drilling regime. I didn't feel like I owed any explanation to these people, even when they brought in a physiologist, to speak with me. What was the point when I would be gone any day now? And as if any of these people even cared in the first place. I was just another number in the system, and they had a job to do. There was one mega bitch, female guard, named Evelyn, and she used to either really like you or really hate you. And God forbid you were one of the unfortunates that she didn't like. She'd make your entire stay there an agonizing nightmare, constantly picking on girls who were not strong enough to cope with their predicament or past issues. She'd stand them up and publicly humiliate them, and even when they begged her through their sobs to let them sit down, she'd only torment them worse, which only made the strong girls want to antagonize the fragile ones with more malicious intent. Luckily, when I had previously been there, she didn't take much notice of me, but I stayed out of harm's way with her, just being quiet and observant. Being back here seemed like an eternity while I held my end of the bargain, but unfortunately, my father didn't. The first chance I saw to run, I took it. I was being sent to go get my blood and urine taken for drug and disease analysis. My driver would be a volunteer from the community, and it was the perfect getaway for me. I was brought from the white solitary room and led into the bright sun, feeling like today would be favorable in my escape. We got to the doctor's office. My whereabouts told me I had plenty of ways to run, and I scouted out the best looking route. My plan was to barge through the volunteers' inexperienced grip and wriggle my way out if needed, then hit the asphalt, running until my legs couldn't carry me any further. Playing it out in my mind felt different to the anticipation that led up to actually doing it. The inner strength I had was the only thing going to help me in this circumstance. We arrived in the parking lot, and I hadn't said a word to him the entire drive. The camera fell. The small-framed Spanish man tried to make a pleasant conversation, but I couldn't see him as anything but a challenge. So I kept quiet instead, ignoring his humorous attempts to befriend me. The car pulled to a stop, and he came around the side to unlock my door. This was it. Here we go, I told myself, and pushed past the volunteer. His arm struggled out at me, but only caught me by my shirt. He didn't even put up much of a struggle, like some of the other trained ones I'd gotten before. They would put me into my body locks of all sort, but he just tore at the collar of my shirt, letting me break free. I had done this many times before, so I knew I wasn't gone yet. I had to first get out of these clothes. The cops would be looking for someone of my description in the area with a blue shirt and khaki pants. So my first stop was a busy shopping complex. I took the money from my scrunchie and bought myself a pair of jeans, a shirt, a sweater for disguise, and my next stop was Dunkin' Donuts to get a chocolate iced donut and a cup of coffee. I didn't have doubts about getting out of the facility, but I wasn't expecting it to be so easy this time. My past excursions all began with an abrupt struggle, sometimes ending in a brutal state of affairs after being pepper sprayed and fastened into some painful lock by forceful men 4 times my size, then tossed into solitary until I saw my next chance to desert. I got to know the guards real well, as I spent a lot of my time being dragged down to the white room by them. There was Jim, a large black man who could have doubled for a Miami Dolphins defensive linebacker. John was another big man with a ponytail and mustache, and he looked like someone who definitely owned a Harley. The last guy, Scott, had a smaller build, but made up for it with his steroid-injected muscles bulging out of his neck, and there was the added height from his curly fro. When they weren't restraining me and holding me captive in solitary, they were actually pretty nice guys, not afraid to have a laugh after some explosive incident, and I held no contempt towards them either. They were just doing their jobs. It was deja vu all over again. Free at last, but where would I go now? With Ron's scouts on the lookout for me, and now the authorities being notified I was a runaway again, I would have a lot of people searching for me, so I knew I had to be careful where I went. My last stop before leaving the shopping center was to use a payphone to call my parents. My dad answered, completely surprised to hear me on the other end. I wanted to sarcastically thank him for breaking his promise to me, and I hope he is happy now. He just lost his daughter for good. I stopped to listen to what he was trying to say, and he told me, I was getting you out in a few days. I found you somebody to stay with. She's a good person who has got teenagers your age. I was just trying to convince your mother to sign the papers to get you out of here. I was so outraged at her ability to put her own wants before the needs of her own flesh and blood daughter. I told him to come pick me up and bring me to the house so I could speak with her for the first time in over a year. But if I felt threatened for 1 second, I'll be on my way quicker than a blink of an eye and on my own for good. He wasn't overjoyed at my proposition, knowing what position this put him in as her husband, but as my father, he decided to put me for once and take me home to confront my mother. I arrived at the house for the first time in a long time, and everything looked different. My parents refurnished and renovated the house. I didn't even have a room anymore. My old belongings in bed were removed, and it was now the office. Of course, my mom didn't meet me at the gate or the front door like her long-lost offspring reunited. No. Instead, she waited for me to come find her out back, smoking cigarettes and having a beer. She stood up from her seat and squinted her eyes, loathing in her hatred. She coldly slapped me hard in the face. The slap stung, but I marched her look with a familiar stone coldness that she could understand. Immediately, we both started to cry, and we washed away our anguish and resentment through our tears and consolidated our feelings for the first time since the chaos first affected our lives. She didn't want to know much of my whereabouts, and she still had a lot of anger to get over. But she asked me to stay home at least. My little brother ran through the back door and hugged me so tight, I started to cry again, and was saddened by just how much time I had missed, the time I had lost just hanging out with my brothers. And it took me even longer to realize how precious time really is. We were never going to be the average Joes next door, but at least this was better than nothing. I loved being with my family again. We had barbecues and bonfires with each other, and life began to slowly piece back together. It was bizarre how normal it was when I first got home. I turned 15 that year, and it was the exact cup of tea that I had needed to boost me up and get me on the right track. I decided to go to school to acquire my general education diploma, or GED, and got a summer job with my dad at Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump's exclusive country club in Palm Beach. Surrounded by lush acres of tropical landscapes, manicured gardens, and a mansion made into a beach club for the rich and famous, it is known as the Jewel of Palm Beach. I was in sheer awe at the gold arched ceilings and the grandeur ballrooms. The spa where I worked was world class, not only oozing in style, but in the way each and every clientele was treated with the utmost service. My focus was now set on becoming a massage therapist, and working my way into a luxurious spa like the one I work for now. I was only a locker room attendant there. I studied many books about the anatomy of the human body and how you can affect a person's well-being and health for the better through a simple healing touch. It was amazing to me the way the body responded to massage. I was more than just interested. I was determined to become a therapist. One of those anatomy books that I had my nose buried in one afternoon on a quiet Tuesday, and it could get pretty lonely in the locker room. So if I weren't busy, I'd sit outside by the spa's reception and read my books in the warmth of the Florida sun. A lovely-looking woman in her late 30s who spoke with a proper English accent approached me. I assumed it was a general question, like, "Where's the ladies' room?" Or, "Was that the famous model from so-and-so?" But she was more interested in the book I was reading. Only believing at first we were just making small talk, she was really intrigued at my choice of reading. She then asked if I did massage on the side. I stated I was only reading the book and had not yet begun to study, but one day I would love to practice massage therapy. She introduced herself as Ghislaine Maxwell. I would later find out that she was the daughter of the late prominent businessman and disgraced newspaper tycoon, Robert Maxwell. I told her my name is Jenna, pointing to my name tag on my shirt, and offered her a cold or hot beverage, as those are my instructed duties at work. She accepted tea and went on to chat a bit about this rich guy that she worked for, and she knew offhand that he was looking for a massage therapist. Just doing me a good deed out of the kindness of her heart, I'm sure, she offered to introduce me to him. I declined her proposition, thinking out loud. Told her I didn't know the body well enough to even attempt an interview. She didn't seem worried at all by my fear of incompetence, saying that if he liked me enough, he would give me the best training in the industry. Ghislaine thought I had a cheery persona and fit the quota for what she was looking for. And as she put in an enthusiastic learner that she said she gathered from the sticky notes popping out of the various sections in my book, I accepted her phone number and the house address and told her I will call her if I'm able to come over after work. I rushed over to the tennis courts where my dad was working and told him of the news. We both thought this could be a wonderful opportunity to get my accreditation in massage therapy. Seeing that it was a lady in her late 30s who came off as more of a nurturer rather than a procuress, neither of us saw any reason to be hesitant. End of chapter 3. Chapter 4. At around 5 p.m., my dad drove me down to the bottom of El Brio Way, on the Palm Beach Intercoastal. We pulled into a short driveway beckoning a large pink mansion with heavy wooden doors. I was so excited about this chance and asked my dad to wish me luck. He gave me a big squeeze and wished me the best. He walked me to the front door, and I rung the door chime. Moments later, we were greeted by an older gentleman dressed in a casual butler uniform. I told him I was here to meet Ms. Maxwell for a massage trial, and he opened the doors for my father and I, telling us to wait in the entry, as Miss Maxwell would be on her way any second. And she was. Down the stairs, she walked with a warm smile, her short black hair seeming very proper and elegant, for now. She shook my father's hand and thanked him for bringing me and kissed us both on the cheeks. They spoke briefly about whom she worked for and about Mar-a-Lago, where we worked. She was in a hurry, you could tell, to end the conversation and say goodbye to my dad, which she did so ever pleasantly. She said the boss was upstairs and waiting my arrival. So with that, I said bye to my dad and began to follow Glenn up the stairs. I was so nervous, but I didn't show it. I kept my reserve and demeanor cool as ice, trying to show maturity for the open position. We continued on to the massage room, passing by a grand crystal chandelier and a couple lengthy wooden hall tables displaying a multitude of photos displaying young girls and beautiful women. Trying not to gawk at them, I didn't even notice that some of those girls were only wearing their smile. Ghislaine asked me how my day at work was, and I told her it was easy peasy as always, just trying to make a simple conversation. There was a fork at the end of the staircase, and she led me to the right-hand side. The lights were dimmed in the bedroom, and I could still see the king-size bed in the middle of the room. We did a U-turn around the bed, which led us into a massage room. Dripping in luxury, I could have definitely compared it to the renowned Mar-a-Lago spas. It had marble walls and a glass-enclosed shower and self-automated steam room at the very end of the blue Burberry carpeted room. There was a large mirror over a basin to the right of the room with an array of oils, ointments, soaps, and lotions, and a small closed door, which I assumed must be a closet. The only thing that struck awkward about this room was the naked man laying face down atop of the turquoise massage table in the center of it. I had to be prepared for this, I told myself. Massage was something I had never done before, so I quickly brushed away my thoughts of possible schemes, wanting to believe wholeheartedly this was going to be legit. Ghislaine introduced us to each other, and I proceeded to make his acquaintance. Looking up from his downwards positions, he looked me over and gave a smile to Ghislaine, an obvious notion of his approval. He was Jeffrey Epstein, as she pronounced it for him, as if I was supposed to recognize his name or something. He affirmed it was his pleasure, and replied to just call him Jeffrey. No need for formalities, she answered, cleverly putting me at ease. This man did not look like someone to be aware of. Both him and Ghislaine appeared to be very nice people and conscious of their health, as their need for massages and spa visits, no alarm bells went off yet. I was prepped by Ghislaine to treat this as a lesson from her and follow her exact lead. If I did good tonight, then maybe I would become Jeffrey's traveling masseuse, seeing the world and getting paid well for it. I was very hopeful. A job like this could really make my dreams come true. I followed suit and washed my hands with warm water so the coldness would not shock Jeffrey's naked body. Then lathered them in rich body butter. Ghislaine told me to always keep one hand on Jeffrey even when getting more lotion, so it didn't make him lose concentration on being relaxed. She gave me a tip and told me to keep a blob of lotion high up on my forearm, so it prevented me from having to keep going back for more and was less disruptive to Jeffrey. This all seemed real to begin with. I was being educated about the body and splitting Jeffrey's body with Ghislaine, mimicking her every motion. Starting with his feet, we began with his heels and arches of his soles, pushing the blood up his calves in upward strokes to rejuvenate the body's blood supply, and being careful to mind his leg hair didn't pull. I was keeping up with her and enjoying the education. It was so interesting how the body worked, and I couldn't believe I was learning all this for free. Once I got a bit of a groove following Ghislaine, they began asking me all sorts of questions about my past, and it didn't take long before the conversation led down the darker experiences of my young life. When they found out that I hadn't led much of a normal existence, they only probed me with more questions, which, being put on the spot, answered honestly. The funny thing was, they didn't seem appalled at all by my statements, rather entertained, if anything. Jeffrey called me a naughty girl with that wry smile of his. And half playful and half defensive, I answered, "No, I'm not. I'm really a good girl, just always in the wrong places." He then replied, "It's okay. I like naughty girls," and rolled over onto his front side to expose his complete nude self. He wasn't the first man to show me his penis, so I wasn't shocked at the appearance of his manhood. But I was incredibly shocked at his complete ease to present himself with an erection. I tried to ignore it, waiting to follow the next directions off of Ghislaine, who surprisingly now stood behind me bare-breasted. Before I had a chance to even think of replying hastily, she began to slowly undress me, while Jeffrey started to stroke his manhood while watching us. She unbuttoned my blouse and removed my bra, revealing my bosoms. Cupping them in her hands, she moved her lips across my nipples, licking and teasing them with her tongue, making them cold and stiff. Next, her hands moved down to my little white skirt, removing the final piece of my remaining uniform. She slid my skirt down my legs with ease, for a moment keeping on my love heart panties so they could both take notice of my apparent youth. They even snickered to each other about how cute she still wears little girl panties, Jeffrey said, and Ghislaine joined in his laughter. Acting as my madam, she instructed me to start licking his nipples, and after I had sufficiently pleasured both of them, then prompted me to go down on Jeffrey orally, while she rubbed her breasts along his body tantalizingly. She moved behind me again, this time to remove my panties and start fondling the delicate folds between my legs. I was still in shock from the initial degrading blow. I hadn't even let the reality sink in. It was all too much for me to emotionally handle, so instead, I hid behind my fears, which I told myself I wasn't going to ever be worth anything at all, and this would probably be as good as it gets for me. After all, I thought, what have I been trained up for until now? Nobody ever stopped to ask if I was comfortable or if I wanted to stop. No. Instead, Glenn only directed me to conclude the massage session by climbing up on the table to be fixated on Jeffrey, straddling me so he could penetrate me. When it was all done and over with, I was taken into the steam room with just Jeffrey to get further acquainted. As Glenn left the room to go get dressed, he asked me to grab his feet and rub them, not saying a word about what just happened, like it was all normal and accepted. I listened to him ramble on about the health benefits of a sauna and the history of it, ignoring the fact of the matter of his pretentiousness degrading my spirit. I figured I had gone too far already. What would be the point in throwing in the towel now, after I'd done exactly what these people wanted? Whilst we were sweating out our bodies' toxins and the steam was blasting my beaming face, I listened to his lessons. Entertaining his ego, I let him become my teacher. He seemed to me like that. He sounded like a very clever and intelligent man, though, telling me his story about how he made himself an empire of billions, from being a middle-class professor to an elite financial advisor for clientele with only billions in their bank accounts. And through his so-called lessons, he became my mentor, and I emerged as his pupil, the teacher's pet. After the sauna, we went to the next glass door beside us where the shower was. He turned tap outwards and stood underneath the water as I stood naked and cold from the temperature difference. Instead of asking me to join him under the warm stream, like I thought he was going to, he handed me a bar of soap and asked me to wash his body from top to toe. It didn't stop there. I had to massage the shampoo and conditioner into his scalp as well. I was bewildered someone would ask this off of someone else. Wasn't it belittling enough having to endure the illicit massage from beforehand, but now this? Surprises kept coming that night, as this was definitely not how I expected my interview to turn out. But that's what I had learned in my short time on this earth. Life was full of disappointment. Let everyone else take the power of authority for myself and use me in whatever way he or she wanted, instead of standing up and giving myself the respect I deserved, which in turn would have helped me get through life without all of the abuse I ended up copying. Not given the belief in myself from an early age on, I suppose is what affected my sense of control. Always letting the ones with power and strength reduce my inner self to shreds until I was cut so tiny in size, I would be completely subdued, only to their wants and needs, left ignoring mine. The men I had encountered in my short experience with them only repeated their inflictions, convincing me there was no running away from the sick world I lived in. Not yet understanding it all came down to the choices I had made for myself. I needed some encouragement and the right words to unlock my very soul. Jeffrey told me the towels were on the heated rack just outside the shower and asked me to get one and pat him down. Again, putting himself first as I sat there freezing while I compliantly patted down his body with the white fluffy towel until he was dried. I nearly expected him to ask me to dress him as well. But not surprisingly, that came later down the track, too. I dried myself off and wiped the makeup from under my eyes, keeping quiet, not sure what to really say, and half embarrassed from the entire evening's events that just took place. I just remained silent whilst we both got dressed until he brought me downstairs, where Ghislaine was sitting at a desk holding his black leather duffel bag. When she moved from the chair to let Jeffrey sit down, she passed him the bag and began to tell me that I had great potential to be a massage therapist. They really liked my style, and who knows where this could lead to. She asked to see me again tomorrow, same time after work. He opened the bag, revealing stacks of brand new $100 bills separated with rubber bands to count by the thousands. He grabbed one stack and took out 2 crisp notes, placing them in my hand. He laughed that it was nearly my whole week's wage at Mar-a-Lago. Only there I didn't have to degrade myself as his little new toy. I got home, my parents were anticipating my arrival. I kept it simple and sweet with my folks, only telling them of the lessons about the body I had received and the future prospects in massage therapy that lie ahead. Nobody questioned who I was working for and complimented my ability to be a hard worker. I quickly got out of that conversation, afraid it might give away a hint of shame in my eyes, but no one caught on. I excused myself to the bathroom to have a shower and stared into the mirror for a moment, asking myself if I could really go through with this, only to mentally respond by reminding myself this would be as good as it gets for a girl of my stature and limitations. I scrubbed myself rigidly in the shower as if it would wash away the filthiness of the night, but it didn't help. I could still feel their hands in me and all over me and inside of me. Trying to sleep that night was nearly impossible too, closing my eyes only to drift away to flashbacks of the moments I had to give myself to Jeffrey and Ghislaine, each replay an exploitation of the vulnerability. The next morning I awoke, feeling anxious about the day ahead, trying to push yesterday's memory from my thoughts. I was quiet for the whole trip to work with my dad. Before we got out of his car in the parking lot, he asked me if everything was okay. I lied, for his sake and mine. My life was being transformed, and I didn't even know it yet. But soon enough, I would be a brainwashed tool, only used for the sexual pleasure of others. About to be entrapped in the same life I had broken free from only months ago. Convincing myself in order to succeed, I had to step up from being a girly teenager and start thinking like a young woman would be my ticket to a great career and a fortunate life. I told myself, so what if I had to bargain my body to this rich old geezer? Some girls get themselves through college by becoming a stripper and using their bodies to pay for degrees. Others go down even worse paths. I guess it was just another way to fathom the road I was going down. The effectiveness of the lies I forced myself to believe was working, as I continued to tell myself I had to make it any way I could, rather than ever letting myself sleep on the streets again. I was trading one shocking lifestyle for another, thinking I was choosing the right one. If I could go back in time to ever meet myself, I would choose this time in my life. I'd start with a good hard smack to my head to first shake some things up in there. And next, I would tell that girl she could actually make it on her own if she just worked hard at earning an honest wage and built her life up slowly. There's no rush or time limit to ever stop reaching for achievement. Sadly enough, I probably wouldn't have even believed myself anyways, learning my life's hard lessons through the experiences I continued to suffer. I went to work at Mar-a-Lago that day, trying hard not to think of what lay ahead in the afternoon to come. But the later the hour got, the more distinguished the knots became in my stomach. I spoke to no one of the details in my explicit interview, but told one girl how I was so happy I was now officially studying massage therapy. Another lie. My friend was surprised and intrigued that these people who could afford the best of therapists in the world chose an untrained 15-year-old girl to perform a massage. She never said it in words, but her body language told me she knew exactly why they wanted to use me. And it wasn't for a therapeutic reason either, and deep down inside, I understood. The rest of the afternoon slipped away quickly. Before I knew it, I was standing before those large wooden doors again, giving a moment's pause, but long enough to draw in my breath and exhale some of the anxiety before ringing the doorbell. Juan answered the door again and told me Ghislaine would be down in a few moments, and asked to follow him into the kitchen. It was a pleasant-looking young girl with blonde spirals in her hair that glanced up from the mound of paperwork before her. Her shocking blue eyes and appealing English accent seemed delightful, and she introduced herself as Emmy, Ghislaine's personal assistant. I introduced myself as Jenna, which is what most people knew me as, and told her I was on an employment trial to become Jeffrey's massage therapist. She had a coy smile on her face that told me she knew exactly what I was on trial for. Something in my gut told me this wasn't the first time a young girl had been trialed for the same position I was about to fill. We were only chatting for a moment before Ghislaine appeared and told me Jeffrey was ready for his massage. I was led through the extensively large house to the winding staircase that would lead me up to the same dreaded room where I would have to reenact last night's performance. I wasn't far from wrong. I gave Jeffrey a massage with Ghislaine leading the way again. This time, we surprisingly made it to the front of his body, and she continued to show me how to massage all the way up to his stomach, pushing my hands in a spiraling clockwise circular motion to not disrupt the bowels, and then we came up to his chest. He couldn't dare contain himself for 1 second longer, telling me to put my lips on his nipples and give them a kiss. Jeffrey moaned in pleasure, and Ghislaine started to undress me from behind. Within moments, I was completely naked, and Ghislaine had her top off. She was caressing my body with her hands, and Jeffrey moved his hands down to stroke his loins while he watched her and I kiss and touch each other. I didn't know if she was doing this for the sake of his eye candy, but she sure did act like she loved having control over me, telling me what to do throughout the entire threesome. Jeffrey's climax was always the end to our sessions, and this time he wanted to have me make him orgasm orally. Afterwards, we went to the ritualistic steam room, this time Glenn joining in with us for the conversation. She asked me to massage her feet this time while we were in the steam room, showing me that Jeffrey wasn't the only one I had to pay my homage to. We all had a shower next, and then we all went downstairs to pay me and have Juan drop me off back home. The following afternoon, I received a call at work. Surprisingly, it was Ghislaine asking me to come over when I got off work again. The compliance side took over, and I told her I looked forward to meeting with them today, instead of telling her to go screw herself for lying to me and making me degrade myself more each time I saw them. I finished work for the day, and my dad brought me over to El Brillo Way again, where the vultures were patiently waiting in their lair. He wished me well as I hopped out of his big truck, looking ever so much like his little girl again. I gave him a smile and a wave as he drove down the long driveway, waiting for him to suddenly turn back and not leave me alone in my task. I shook myself out of that calamity and put on my big girl's face. Juan brought me to the kitchen again as I waited for Ghislaine. He offered me a cold drink and some fruit on a platter. I accepted and was grateful for the rejuvenation before I went to work again. It wasn't long before Ghislaine approached me from behind with a cold, intense look in her eye. I jumped from my seat, feeling like maybe I shouldn't have been eating and drinking while on the job. Just her demeanor seemed annoyed and temperamental in the seconds that she appeared. She told me I would be on my own today, as she had business to attend to. So make sure I remember what she had taught me, as my trial depended on it. End of chapter 4. So I am going to call it for this session. We will continue with chapter 5 on my next broadcast, which should be tonight. I'm just going to get some emails sent and some other stuff. I'm going to let my voice rest a little bit as well. So hopefully people are around for tonight. If not, it will be up tomorrow if people want to check it out when it's not live. Also, if any of my videos do get taken down, as some of them have been, such as my George Webb interview, and multiple George Webb interviews. I did one video about Dr. Stella Emanuel that was taken down as well. And then one video interview with Mr. John Wedger, who actually is mentioned in the Fall of the Cabal documentary in chapter 2. If people want to check that out, I did an interview of that as well. So we'll be pick up with chapter 5 in my next stream of Miss Roberts' story. If you guys enjoyed this, please hit the subscribe button if you're so inclined to do so. It's free to do so. And if you guys want to hit the like button too, that would be cool. If you really want to support the channel, I would really appreciate a donation of some sort, or if anybody wants to join my Patreon, you can do it for as little as $1, or you can make a bigger donation as well, or a bigger Patreon subscription if you want to do that too. Again, all of my content will be on brand YouTube, completely uncensored. And if people want to give me a sub over there, I'm actually a Rhodium account, which is very exciting. The people over at BNT really support me. They really like my content, which is cool. They are based in the UK. And if people want to give me a subscription on BNT, it really helps me move up on the algorithm charts. So thanks for tuning in, guys. All the best from the Midwest. This is the Lonely Ronin, the samurai without a master, the young Jedi. Addy adds Anakin Skywalker. I'll live stream again in a few hours for chapter 6. Chapter 5. Until then, stay frosty. And until next time, people.